Hunt Down the Freeman is a Half-Life 2 mod that is currently on Steam Greenlight, so, it's been sitting there for the past 2 days. You can vote to get it greenlit or not. And basically the story goes that you play as one of the Marines who was in Black Mesa, and Gordon Freeman came and obviously killed your friends, and I think you were the only survivor. And you play as the Marine 20 years later when Gordon Freeman comes back, when he gets released from, the stasis by the G-Man, and then you hear about him and you want to go and get revenge on him. So it's all in the Half-Life universe. I believe there's characters who was in there like Eli Vance and Father Grigori. We'll see that in the trailer. So as I just said, there is a trailer that you can watch. There'll be a link in the description of this video. If you're at this video, I'm guessing you've already seen that, and you know what I'm talking about. But if you haven't watched that, go and watch that and come back, and I'll talk a bit about the trailer, because, obviously the trailer is trying to sell you the whole thing, and this is currently undergoing an Indiegogo campaign for $100,000, and that is a lot of money. If I had that, well, I probably never need to work again. So Philip from Run, Think, Shoot, Live did a video on this where he kind of talks about this as well, and that's where I heard about this, so you can watch that. The video's down in the description. Yeah, he talked about the fact that nothing was being sold to him. Like, the screenshots they had were just basically from the trailer, and they didn't look spectacular. And the trailer itself, it was cool seeing some of the animation parts, but the gameplay it showed, what little gameplay it showed, there was nothing there. It looked terrible, and yes, I'm one for saying you need to actually try it before, but if you're going to sell something and ask for that much money, you need to do better than that. So basically, the map design in the trailer didn't look that impressive. In fact, it looked terrible. It looked like it'd been built in an hour or something. So that's not what you want in one of these kind of campaigns. And given this is going to get, or it could get, greenlit and put on Steam, this is a terrible starting point for this. I think the cutscenes were definitely the selling point. It looked cool, so basically if it was a movie, it would have been great. It's not, however, it is a game, and this has come up over and over again, especially in light of the closure. Basically, people don't take too well to cutscenes, or at least cutscenes in the way they're usually done aren't done very well. And from what I hear, these cutscenes in, Hunt Down the Freeman are going to be after every single map, conjoining the maps together. And that's going to completely break up the gameplay. And I think that shouldn't be a thing, basically. The advert or trailer did show some HTC Vive footage, and I think that's pretty cool to have kind of that element in it as well. But if the base game's no good, then what good's it going to be on HTC Vive? I think that's just a separate selling point. Just a side note, what I did notice in the trailer is it had cremators in it, and I think combined super soldiers, and they're cut enemies from Half-Life 2, so it's interesting how they can be playing about with the lore and the canon. But as I said, this isn't about the storyline, this is about the funding and how it's going to affect the modding community, mapping and modding community. So just to go back, Hunt Down the Freeman is being made by a man called Berkan Denizyaran. I'm sorry, I can't pronounce that. I'm not entirely sure where he's from, but I believe English isn't his first language. But he makes it, basically. I've never heard about him, but more about that later. Hunt Down the Freeman has a home page, a Steam Greenlight page, an Indiegogo page, an IndieDB page. So it's not a mod DB, it's IndieDB. And all these links are down in the description. So just to go over some of the problems and issues I and many other people in the modding community have with this, because obviously it's being compared to Prospect a lot, and I'll talk a bit about Prospect, hopefully, if I remember later. But it's kind of a different scenario. It's the same scenario, but actually much worse than it seems. But first we'll talk about kind of the funding of it, because $100,000 is a lot of money. And, there was something posted on the Steam page about why they needed it, and it's all sound, the reasons why they need it, or at least it, up front it sounds okay. The fact that they need 50,000 for licensing in general as a standalone actual game, 25,000 for Havoc, obviously. And here's the interesting thing. If you're charging, you need to pay Havoc the money. But if you're not charging, I believe you don't have to pay them anything. So you're actually going to be paying for this game. So not just are they expecting that we fund this, but then we're also going to have to pay a lot of money. I'm just taking a guess, but I'm guessing it'll be somewhere like £14, £15. Yeah, I know I'm dealing in pounds. It'll be $20, I'll say. It'll be that much for something like this. That's what my estimated guess is. And it's a good guess, because Black Mesa was round about that, £15. And I'm guessing they'll want to charge the same. So there's a lot of money. And also, all the other stuff you mentioned, yes, you do have to pay for if you are selling it. So that in itself's a problem, because they're just asking for so much money. And who's willing to give it? At the moment, I think it's only got like $12 at the moment on the Indiegogo page. I'll just check that as of recording. Yeah, one backer who's donated $12. I'll just refresh the page. Nope, still $12. So you can see it's not going very far. No one's really buying it, or no one's buying it enough to donate. I can see a few comments here and there saying this looks pretty cool, but no one's going to actually back it. And also, another issue aside from the money is the amount of cutscenes they are selling. And I mentioned this earlier. As a Half-Life 2 mod, we don't want to see extensive cutscenes. It says here 45 to 90 minutes of cutscenes, and that might seem little, but that is a lot of cutscenes. 45 to 90 minutes. And I'll use the closure as an example. When the cutscenes happened, it felt like the game was kind of being yanked out the hand. It felt like my keyboard was just being pulled away from me, and I was just made to sit there and watch. That's what cutscenes do, and in certain games, aside from Half-Life, they can be very, very good. I mean, I'm not a fan of them in general, but they actually add to the story. And maybe, without judging this, maybe they will add to the story, but really we want the gameplay. We want to keep playing. That's what made Half-Life 2 and Half-Life such a magical game, for lack of a better word, magic, is the fact that it didn't have to have cutscenes. It had scripted parts to it where the characters were scripted to do stuff, but it still made you feel part of the world. Having cutscenes completely removes that, and it loses its, as I'm calling it here, magic. But you know what I mean. You know what I mean when I'm talking about magic. You're a wizard, Harry. I'm a what? You're a wizard. You can do it. You're a wizard, Gordon. But then, of course, he doesn't speak. Yes. So, cutscenes, they shouldn't be selling the amount of cutscenes. In fact, they shouldn't really have cutscenes. Maybe a cutscene at the start, a cutscene at the end. But seriously, having them all the way through, and I've been told they'll be having them after every single map, or cutscenes are going to be what conjoins the maps together. And that's not good, basically. So it says, according to the introduction on their Greenlight page, it took them just over 5 months. 5 months for something that seems as big as what it would be if it was released. Now that's crazy, basically. I don't quite know what to make of that. I mean, all of these mods, they take years to make. I mean, Crowbar Collective are taking years to make, like, one or a couple of chapters. It's about 3 Zen chapters or something, I can't remember, but it's taking them years, 5 months to create what they've got already. That's shocking, and obviously I'm talking from an outsider's perspective at the moment, but I will go in depth and tell you my thoughts, as I explain more, so then you can get the full picture. But I mean, that's crazy. Could this damage the modding reputation, the Half-Life 2 modding community's reputation? Potentially yes, and at the same time no, because if they release it, a lot of people, I think Philip said this in his video, and I saw a few other comments that said people who have never played a Half-Life mod will really enjoy it, and people who have played a lot of Half-Life mods won't, because obviously we know what they're all about. We know what's required, basically. So I don't think it would completely wreck the Half-Life 2 modding community. Again, I don't even know if this is going to make it out. I doubt it very, very much. But I've never heard of him. I've never heard of Berkan before. And it happened with Richard Seabrook, who made Prospect. And I think Philip talked a bit about this as well. No one knows who he is. He's got nothing to show of his previous works. He's not shown any of his mods. To be honest, I doubt he's ever made a Half-Life 2 mod before. I believe he's just played Half-Life and thought, I want to make something like this. Oh, there's easy developer tools for it. Let's get going. And then he's found animators to do the stuff. But they have no presence in the community. And I doubt anyone with a presence would do something like this. Like, I believe everyone who's been around the Half-Life 2 modding community for a long time, I believe they would just release their mods on ModDB, RunThinkShootLive.com. They don't need to sell them on Steam, and that's the key thing. Sell them. Obviously, they're thinking about selling this because they wouldn't then require the money to pay to Havoc or Rad or all these other things that they need to pay for. And I've seen a few forums of people who kind of have worked on this project, and they even dealt the game, and I'll come back to that in a bit because I spoke to someone about that, about actually being involved in this. Again, I'll come back to that later. Berkan, the guy who makes this game, he has no workshop items. I've checked on his Steam, couldn't find any workshop items for anything. So obviously you'd be looking for Portal 2 maps, Counter-Strike Global Offensive maps, they all have Steam Workshop. Gary's mod, but there's none of that. Basically, he has no experience. And I don't know if you know these times when you go on like forums and you see someone going, I want to make a mod. All I need is someone to program, someone to make the maps, someone to do the sound. This is exactly what that is. Now, usually it's I was going to say usually it's a little kid who does that, and generally it is kids who don't quite understand that you've actually got to be able to make them. But in this scenario, it's someone who's a bit older and they're actually going through with it all. Because we've all had that experience. We've all played Half-Life 2, and I can guarantee a lot of you who will be listening will have thought, I really want to make Half-Life 2. I want to make something like Half-Life 2. We've all captured, and here's the magic again, we've all captured a bit of the magic and then wanted to go and make our own version of it. When I first played Half-Life 2, I remember walking to school, imagining like a gunship flying overhead, and I said, I'll make this as the map. And it'll be so cool, and we can run up the slope, and then the school could be like a combine base or something. But obviously, it's just too ambitious, usually. But what this guy's doing in Half-Life 2 is crazy. Like, he's actually acting on that kind of urge to make Half-Life 2 mods. That almost naive urge, that kind of, I'm going to make a full-length Half-Life game. Because it doesn't seem he's got any experience, and he's just gone and he's asked people to do the work for him. He hasn't done anything. He's asking other people to do that. And as I say, it's typical. You see it on forums, but this is actually, he's actually followed through with this. Now, I said I was going to talk about one of the people who were involved in this project. I spoke to Ifasor, who admitted that not admitted, it's not a bad thing. He'd said he'd been a part of this and he'd been asked to do mapping for this project. He is credited in the credits, but he's not sure about the project. He's probably got the same viewpoint as me, and I spoke to him about it. And basically what happened is Berkan found some of Ifasor's maps on the workshop, the zombie survival maps for Gmod of all things, for Gary's mod, so they're not even for Half-Life 2. And he found them, and he said he wanted these maps for his game, for Down The Freeman. So obviously Ifasor, I don't think he was doing anything with the maps, so he said yes, he'd give them the maps, which is fine. But the thing is, with Ifasor's maps, there is no Half-Life 2 elements in them, because they're zombie survival maps for Gmod. They shouldn't have any Half-Life 2 elements in. So how Berkan can take these maps and then turn them into something that's going to be the next big Half-Life 2 standalone game with all these cool cutscenes and the greatest gameplay, well, improved gameplay it says here, with this entirely new stories and 6 to 8 hours of gameplay. It's beyond me. Like, honestly, the maps that Ifisar gave him were good, but they weren't at all at the level that this should be, and obviously because they were zombie survival maps for Gmod. I mean, that is crazy. And then I believe he also sent Ifisar a map to kind of do up and improve, but it was actually like a death run map. And again, that's crazy how it's not actually made as a Half-Life 2 map. And this stuff is just, it shouldn't happen, basically. Yeah, so just to get a basic sense of what's going on, he contacted Ifisar a few months ago, like 2 months ago. And I believe Ifisar didn't know who he was. That's crazy how Berkan, or whatever his name is, actually contacted someone who he didn't know at all. Like, he just went on the workshop and typed in, like, maybe because one of them was like a subway map, maybe he wanted a subway in his game, so he just typed in subway and found that. But obviously for a game like this, you're asking for $100,000, and you're asking random people for their maps that have been made ages ago, that aren't even anything to do with Half-Life 2, that were made for an entirely different reason. You see how this is crazy? You see how messed up this whole situation is? Obviously, Ifisar, as I said before, didn't really want to do this. And, he said that the creator of Hunt Down the Freeman didn't have any plans on what he wanted to do. There was no concept art. There was no storyboards, no other art. He just wanted Ifisar to create this map out of nowhere, which adds to kind of the madness of this all. And Ifisar wasn't even told about anything else. He didn't know any of the members of the team, if there is such team, or it's just this one guy getting individual people, which I am inclined to believe it is just the one guy asking people like Ifisar who have done maps before. He's basically stealing his work, although Ifisar, I think, gave him permission because he wasn't using the levels. I'm not entirely sure. Yeah, the whole situation with the team of people, like, if we look, there's a lot of people credited to making this, aside from Ifisar, and I don't know who any of these people are. And, on Philip's video, he looked at them and he didn't know who any of them were. None of them have any, presence, just like Berkan. None of them have any presence in the Half-Life 2 modding community. So they're just random people. We may know one or two. Where does the madness end? There's a lot more that you've got to think about instead of just watching the trailer and thinking that looks cool. So I did do a bit of digging into this, as you've seen. I did speak to Ifisar, and he did obviously give me permission to talk about this. Just as I kind of draw this rant section to a close, I do want to talk about the Indiegogo Goals, which I thought was a bit of a joke, and I did comment on Philip's video. Again, you can get the link in the description. Actually, no, I've missed out something, but I'll maybe highlight that and go back to that. But that basically, the Indiegogo Goals are $100,000 for successful completion of the game, okay? So if they get paid the price that they're asking for, they will give us the game. That's good. For $115,000, they'll give us free story DLC. Whoopee! Not really, by the way. We don't want free story DLC, we want a finished game. Then we've got, for $130,000, 130,000, we've got the 7-hour war survival mode, $150,000 co-op mode, then we've got second free DLC, PvP multiplayer, and then for $250,000 we've got an animated mini-series, and for $500,000 we've got an animated movie. And this is beyond me, how the more money they're getting shouldn't equal the more content they churn out. If we pay them just magically in this imaginary world, imagine somehow they manage to get $500,000 tomorrow, they should still give us the finished game and nothing beyond that. They shouldn't be giving us, they shouldn't be planning a second free DLC. I bet you they haven't even thought of that anyway, but they shouldn't be planning it. If they want to include DLC in the original plan, they should have said, we will be in fact, well, you should never do that, but they should be saying, or co-op mode. If they want to release a co-op mode, they should say that in the original plan, but not give us it as extras for the amount of money they get paid. Like, if I was like crowdfunding a mod that I was making and I got 500,000 and I'd only asked for 100,000, I'd just give you a better version of the core game, of the single player storyline. I wouldn't add anything else. There'd be no point. I'd have enough money to keep me going, but not, I wouldn't need to add anything to it. And we don't want them to get distracted making an animated movie. I mean, that's crazy. The thing I forgot about before that mini micro rant was the fact that in the advert, it shows Half-Life 2 maps inside their game. And this is an issue that has been brought up. Will they get, basically Valve's blessing to release this? Will Valve say, yes, off you go and release it? And yes, there is a chance that that would happen. I honestly believe Valve would just pass anything if it's got enough crowdfunding, or crowd support rather. But the fact that it's including Half-Life 2 maps, it showed Eli Vance's lab in Black Mesa East. And there was another location, but I can't remember what it was. But basically, it's got locations in there that were in Half-Life, and obviously they're the good-looking maps because they were actually made by Valve when they made Half-Life 2. But I don't believe you're allowed to do that. Not even Valve copied their own maps over Half-Life 2 Episode 1 and 2. So the fact that you're using Half-Life 2 maps in your mod, well, that's illegal. You're stealing someone else's property, and I think if you didn't have that, Valve would be more inclined to say yes, but with that, I don't think so. I think Valve are going to come down on you like a ton of bricks for having that. So that's just a little thing to think about. Again, I can't speak very much on that, as it's just something I noticed before watching the video, and I'm not sure how that's going to fit in. Now, there is something on Steamworks, a frequently asked questions site about source engine games on Steam. And it's got questions like, I've got a source engine mod that has been greenlit, should I fill out the paperwork? Stuff like that for people who are obviously in that situation. And it's talking about licensing fees and all that. So this is where I kind of found out about, or got more information about the fact that they're asking for $100,000 so they can pay Havoc and pay for a license, because they're going to be, so that means they're going to be charging money for it. And obviously they can, there's all these, basically, I lost my train of thought there. There's all these things that it says here that Valve have said, and I'm not necessarily sure this mod will fit into all of it, especially with what I've just said about the maps being copied. So you can actually look at that for yourself. Link down in the description for Source Engine Games on Steam, frequently asked questions. Okay, so I've gone over the Indiegogo goals. I've said before that there was a ton of questions unanswered. He seems to be question dodging. I don't think he's quite sure. He's probably not looked into it enough. This Berkan guy, is that his name? I'm sorry, I keep forgetting. Berkan. So next on the agenda of jokes, maybe they're not a joke, as I'll go over later. It's like on the frequently asked questions page in Indiegogo, on their Indiegogo page, there's a question that reads, what is the release date for Hunt Down the Freeman? And the answer is end of 2016. Now, that's a facepalm moment right there. The fact that he's worked on it 5 months beforehand, and he wants to charge money and get $100,000 for it, and he's using maps that he's not even made, or even overseen being made. It's beyond me. It's like someone needs to go and bring this guy back down to earth and just say, look, this isn't how it works. You're going to have to start making maps yourself, and just making maps small time. Because if it's 5 months before, that's under a year now, as of recording this video, that it would have taken to fully develop it. And nothing took that long with a team of what he has. Basically just him asking other people to do the work for him. So the finished product wouldn't be very good if it was released at the end of 2016. Yeah, I don't think they'll have trouble getting greenlit. I think it'll easily, like, people are going to see a lot of naive people who don't know the Half-Life modding style, who've never played Half-Life mods, they'll give it a big thumbs up. But getting approval from Valve, as I said, with using the maps and the whole that whole issue, I'm not sure. Right. I have some solutions, because, I'm all ranting about what the problems are, but, I actually came up with some solutions that could help the developer with this. And these solutions are, difficult to hear if you're him, but basically it doesn't involve releasing this at all as it stands. And the first one is finish a map, just a single map, and release something. Just like for instance, a Vil map that you get on Run, Think, Shoot, Live. Make something as small as that and work your way up. You can't start having had no experience of modding to then go and make something as big as this. And when we say make, obviously we understand that this guy isn't doing very much himself, but asking other people who can do models and make maps. And I wouldn't be surprised if he was wanting a composer in. I think I read that he wanted a composer in. So, yeah, finish something. Even don't charge for it. Release it for free. Because any money you do make off the failed Indiegogo thing can go and pay the people who haven't paid yet. That's a solution there. Just don't release anything for it. And you don't have to pay Havoc. You don't have to pay for anything, any of these licenses. You'll just, it's a free mod. That's fine. We've not paid anything, so we're happier than we would be not wasting our money. And I don't know how much money you'll earn on Indiegogo, or if that'll be enough to pay your workers, but hey ho. It actually says on the page, this is kind of a side point, but it's something I want to go over anyway. It says on the Indiegogo page, if you donate $30, you get added to the closed beta. Now, anyone can pay $30. Like some kid could just say, oh, I like this project, never played Half-Life before, never played Half-Life 2, never played any mods, but I'll donate $30 and you can add me to the beta and I'll test your game for you. That's a bad idea. Get experts in to beta test and do as they say, basically. Get the best people, the people who know Half-Life 2 mods, the people who know, modding of any kind, basically, and how Half-Life 2 levels should work and how the gameplay is. People like Jason Gimba, people like Jim Partridge, and if you really want a run for your money, get Crowbar, and he'll, I'm sure, give you a detailed explanation of what's wrong with your game or mod. But get experts in and get them to test it and act on what they say. This is something that isn't done very often. I mean, I'm not sure people know what the Half-Life 2 community or Half-Life modding community is like, because a lot of people just look at ModDB and think, well, it's just people posting the mods on here, but I don't know if people actually know. So, maybe try and familiarize yourself with the community. Try and familiarize yourself with runthinkshootlive.com and sit around the site for a while and go to the Hall of Fame and look at all that, and watch my videos if you want, and watch other people's videos. Don't know why I added watch my videos in, but you can get a perspective on mapping with someone playing through the mods. Do that, get experts in. The last point I've just written down as a side note is just make it into a movie. There's content there. I think the story's pretty sound. And I can see the cutscenes are animated to a good level, or they're done quite well. Maybe the models could be changed, but I'm sure that can be done. If you just make it into a movie and cut the gameplay from it, then I'm sure it'll be made into a great movie instead of, because that saves you from asking people who don't know for maps, which aren't even Half-Life 2 maps. That's just a longer video about it, and just a roundup. I'm not entirely sure this will get released. Basically, this as I've outlined, it's doomed to fail, and I'll just go over it one last time in case it hasn't sunk in to your brain yet. Basically, they're charging $100,000 for a game that's going to have lots of cutscenes that took just over 5 months to create until now, and we've never heard of the modder. We haven't heard of any, apart from one, of the other people who were credited in the credits. As I said, the creator has no experience. The developer asked Ephesaur for 2 maps that weren't even Half-Life 2 maps, that were Gmod maps from a few years ago. The Half-Life 2 maps have been taken and added to this, so Valve may not like it. We haven't seen very much for this Indiegogo campaign, and there's tons of questions unanswered. And all this bundles together to a failure, basically. And so it's just a very long video about it, and I hope you enjoyed it. Links are all down in the description for everything I talked about. If you have any questions, feel free to comment or message me, and I'll see you all again soon. Dolmo Douglas, over and out.